What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 127 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. Remember to breathe. Remember to breathe when you talk. Thank you.
I'm just so excited, Max, because we have a very special episode this week,
Yes, we
of
do.
course. We're doing our first ever embargoed review
Yup.
for Ultros, a
Ultros, yes.
psychedelic time loop Metroidvania that you have been putting in a ton of work this week playing.
Absolutely. I've really sort of thrown myself into the game, and I there's something about sort of this is my first time reviewing something for embargo. It's the first time or for a long time, it's been nice to play a game and not feel like I'm seeing other people's experiences affect my own, or that if I get a bit stuck, not taking the time to work it out because there's a guide available. It just sort of it feels like how it used to be. So yeah, very excited about this and very excited to do some more things like this.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to hear about your time with it, and I've been helping you edit the videos, so I've been like
Hmm.
seeing the footage, and I'm excited to get to talk to you about it now finally.
Brilliant.
Big thank you to Haddock and Kepler Interactive, the developer and publisher on the game, for providing us a code. And of course, we do want to let you guys know that this being a very special episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast, we will have another episode later this week if you are looking for our thoughts on today's / this week's, depending on when you're listening to it, Xbox news, right? We have that Xbox presentation they're going to be giving on Thursday, and we're going to record another, probably shorter extra episode of this show to talk about. I mean, I guess shorter or longer, depending on how big of
Yeah.
an announcement that one is. But lots of
Could be
news
a
to
big one.
follow up from last week's show where we talked about the Xbox news. So if you're looking for, your regular deep dive into the news this week, we'll have that over there as well. So make sure you tune in for that extra episode. All right, so let's not bury the lead any longer here, Max. Let's get into it. You
Absolutely.
made a TikTok about Ultros a while ago, right? We had a short up about the Metroidvanias that you were looking forward to playing at Steam Next Fest. You were
Yes.
able to get a review code instead of playing the
Yep.
demo. You got
It
to play
skipped the
the
next
entire
fest
game.
so yeah, it skipped the next fest episode because I didn't want to sort of talk about it or give too many of my thoughts and sort of like, spoil what I was working on because I did, I was at the time in the throes of the full game. And yeah, shall I just go straight in, sort of, give a little intro to the people?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess give the elevator pitch if they've not heard of Ultros.
Yeah.
We know it's a Metroidvania. Great. What else should we know about it?
So Ultros is a sort of a time looping Metrovania, as you said at the very beginning. You sort of wake up, start the game waking up on a spaceship called the sarcophagus, and you start to explore as you do, and you find a weapon. You sort of meet an NPC that sets the story into motion. You find out there's a demon called Ultros that's sort of waiting to be born on the ship, almost like the ship's like a womb, and this demon is in there. But sort of you meet characters that are trying to stop it. You meet characters that are trying to sort of ensure that Ultros is born. And your goal is to destroy 7 shamans in incubators that are spread across the ship that are connected to Ultros. And every time you destroy one of those, the game restarts and you sort of go back to the beginning. So that is your main goal: is you're trying to free Ultros, and every time you do, you wake up again right back where you started. With none of your items, none of your abilities, exactly where you started. But now, there are some things that have changed, and I'll go more into that. That's sort of the meat of the
So
game.
does that
Go on.
happen? You say like every time you complete the loop, you'll lose everything either way. If you
Yes, yeah,
die, does
every
that happen as well? Or
no, so this is interesting. I'd never thought of the game as a roguelike before, when I was sort of looking at it before. It was only when I was sort of speaking with the publisher and the developer that they had said in the email it's a roguelike, and I thought, "Oh, I didn't know it was a roguelike. That's interesting." I knew there was a time loop mechanic, but not that it specifically was a roguelike. And having played the game, I don't think it is a roguelike. Um, and the thing with a roguelike is that, there's a lot more RNG involved in a roguelike when you die as well. Like, you die, you start from the beginning, it's like, "Oh, one more go, one more go." But when you die, it doesn't reset your run, you just go back to, like, your nearest save point, or if it's in front of a boss, it's the nearest boss. And there is no real RNG. It's not like you're, randomly designed levels, or you're picking up certain items and then, like, you can have different builds, or you can, each run being different from one another. The time loop sort of serves 2 things. it's sort of a narrative. It fuels the narrative and it fuels the characters you meet, and some of them are aware that you're in a time loop, and some of them aren't. But also, it gives a chance for some of the different mechanics you interact with to take effect. Um,
So talk to
and
me
I
about
will get
that
into
because
those.
I know you said and we don't have to get into the nitty gritty if you want to talk about them in more detail later, but I know that like plants are a big part of the game, right?
They
That
are, yeah.
there's this mechanic of there are I think you said 10 different types of
There's
plants
10, yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah, like, there's a surprising amount of gardening in this game, and I knew there'd be some gardening going into it because that was one of the things that when I first sort of was looking into this game, and I remember thinking, like, "This is an odd thing for them to be focusing on." Like, is it a farming game? I'll get into that in a second because I do wanna get into that in depth, but I the main meat of the game is, there's these shamans spread across the world. They're sort of marked you on your map, so you know roughly where you're going. They're guarded by like a boss or something, and in typical sort of like Metroidvania state, there's like an open world where you can in more or less a free order, you can go and tackle each one of these in its time, and they're guided by a boss, or there's some like puzzle elements behind it, or there's like a game show element behind it. In one of them, and there's some decent variety between these areas and what you have to do with them. So you're not like doesn't feel too repetitive. It's not all sort of going around doing combat. And in fact, I was even able to sort of skip some of the boss fights through like actions I did in the game. I sort of like I read something on a statue has an inscription on it, and I read the inscription and I tried out the thing that it said, and the boss sort of like let me go basically, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not sure
that's
you can do
cool.
like a full pacifist run, but there are a couple of things that I did that I was like, oh, cool, I can skip these encounters or I can change the encounters. However, because it is a time loop and things do reset, you can go and do it as well. So you can go and do it the normal way, or you can sort of do it the other way.
That was gonna be my question is like is do you think that's in there to give you the ability to like control how long it takes you to do certain things, so you don't have to, like, fight a boss the same way every time because you, like,
I
know the
do think
shortcut or
so.
whatever, or
I think so because there is like a large element of backtracking in this game.
okay.
Because, because it is a time loop and you start at the beginning, you will be retreading a lot of the same ground.
Also a
Um,
Metroidvania, right? So it's
Also
like that's kinda
Metrovania,
par for
yeah,
the
yeah.
course.
And there's an entire sort of like almost like second half to the game or like a post game sort of thing where you will be treading all over the map again. And there are interesting ways to tackle that. There are ways where you have to maybe go backwards or you want to avoid certain things, so you go a different way or you try and take a shortcut. And yeah, I think that is in there, so you can do that. But there's also achievement side to them. So some of them are just world building stuff as well. It's just in the lore. Um, I want to talk about the visuals first because that's probably the thing that anyone who's seen this game or seen the videos about it that we've been doing will have noticed. The first thing I've noticed that it's a incredible looking game, right? It's bright and it's colourful. The art style I learned yesterday is by El Huervo, who's the artist who worked on Hotline Miami. Um, so
Oh,
that whole thing
cool.
is his thing, and
It's
I've
funny
even
because you brought that up, like, in the
yeah,
pre-coverage a little
right,
bit of like, oh, it has that kind of personality to it and everything,
yeah.
and I mean, I
So
guess that super vibrant palette, right, like, is
yes,
very
yeah,
much
and
in their style.
I even sort of saw a tweet, yesterday or the day before. No, it was today, I think, actually. I saw a tweet of, like, from when the game was announced, and someone was replying to the thing saying, "Yeah, this has got El Huevo written all over it," and or Huevo, sorry, written all over it, and it is him. But it's bright, it's colourful, it's loud, it's got a crazy colour palette. It's almost got like a comic book feel to it,
Sure.
and that extends to the UI and, like, the whole thing feels like a really nice, comprehensive, uniform sort of thing. However, that does bring up an issue where, like, because of how busy the screen is at all times and because everything is sort of in this very similar art style, it can sort of get a bit of getting used to work out what's interactable, what's just sort of part of the background, what's a piece of set dressing.
Mm.
So it can get quite messy at times. There's like stuff where you think you can interact with it, or like it's clearly just the artist going wild and being like, we've had this cool concept for this cool thing you can look at. And I get to it and I'm like, this is wicked. I can't wait to find out what this does. And it's actually just a piece of the background. And then there's also things where I'm like, this is obviously just a piece of the background, and then when you go near it, there's a little icon above you that says "Y," and it's like, "Oh, this is an object I can use." Okay, I wasn't aware, and I do think that um, it's like learning a language almost, where it's like eventually after a couple of loops, you will start to recognize, I know what this is, I know what that is. So it's only like while you're getting used to the game, you're understanding how things work. There might be that difficulty, but you can lose track of enemies sometimes, or you'll be shot by something, and you'll be like, well, where did that come from? But then when you learn that there can be enemies hidden in the corners, you sort of take it. Obviously, it all looks incredible. It looks amazing. It's a looker. It's a real looker, but it does sometimes get a bit busy for its own good. But that's not a distraction at all because I think it is just there were points where in the game where things were happening, and that bit in Avengers Endgame when Steve Rogers, Captain America, gets in the spaceship for the first time. They take off into space, and his eyes widen as they hit hyperspeed, and it's like,
Yeah.
whoa! I had that moment where like there was a visual on the screen, and I could feel my eyes like widening as I was like, whoa, like just taking it in. And that that didn't go away because that is sort of something you see every loop, and that never went away. Where I was just like, whoa, like I'm really seeing something cool here.
Yeah, and I get that. I think sometimes that's like a trade-off you have for having something that's really vibrant and dynamic and like challenging
Hmm.
visually is that like, yeah, like you're gonna have those moments sometimes where you're like, oh, okay, like, you know, every like I've seen X cool little detail and I was able to interact with that. Can I do that with this? And it's like
Yeah,
like you said, it's not a detraction as much as it is just like it's part of the kind of like exploration of it, and I can see why in a game with backtracking and, like, secrets to miss and stuff like that, people could get frustrated by something like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but I think it's also just kinda like, it's par for the course sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
It's also it's new. It's like a new look. It's like if you when you play Cuphead, for example, sometimes there are things that you're gonna be like, well, in a cartoon, sometimes in old cartoons, you see how the background looks like it's been painted and then the front looks like it's been drawn where the cells are over it, and you can see, that character's about to interact with that element because that element looks different. Whereas Cuphead doesn't have that. Cuphead is all just sort of like one cohesive style, and you might be forgiven for not realizing that something was a platform or something was or wasn't interactive or something because it is all
Exactly,
one style.
exactly.
But when you get used to it, that's it.
Yeah, you just have to, like because it has a distinct visual language, you have to learn to speak it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you do, like when you're in, you're in. It's quite soothing, like at times. There's like a really like nice ambient soundtrack, and at first it doesn't really feel like it sort of matches with the gameplay because at the start you're expecting to play it like a normal Metrovania where you're attacking enemies. It does teach you to attack the enemies quite a lot, but that does take a bit of a backseat eventually, and you do sort of slow down and drink it in and take things slower, and you do sort of go for more pacifist options when you're doing later game things, and then the soundtrack really does start to sort of like make sense. It calms you when you're doing a lot of the planting and stuff like that. But also like taking it in and drinking it in is important because there's a lot of environmental storytelling going on here. Like there are a lot of characters talking, and in typical sort of like Dark Soulsy fashion, sometimes they're saying things that make sense, and sometimes they're saying things that's just sort of like lore or like just adds some texture to the world. It never really fully explains like what the story is, but it sort of lets you kind of work it out. And I do think that's nice because at no point does it sort of like give you twists or it sort of like says to you point blank, this is what's happening, but you do sort of get an idea of like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if this is the case, or if oh, this isn't how I thought it was at first because now I'm learning new things and I'm getting more information from the game and I've uncovered something naturally that makes me realize more about what's going on in the world. And there's like bits of artwork you can find that sort of give you hints of a story, and it's all about piecing it together, I guess. And I'm sure there's going to be videos coming out where people explain it or whatever, but I do think that like it's down to interpretation half the time, and I do like that. And there's like collectibles you can find that give you some like a little bit of flavor text from the perspective of different characters. Like each area will have some to find, and there'll be a character in that area that's talking, and you sort of get an idea of what their motivations are, or sort of like what they've been doing, and that's yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. So I was gonna jump in because I wanted to answer a question while I remember, and that's
Okay.
a good point for me to move on. Andrew Valentine in the Discord, he asks how movement and combat compare to the big dog Metrovanias. I think that's a good jumping off point for me to sort of go in and sort of um, explain what the combat's like. 'Cause like I said before, there is a lot of combat at the start. You're doing a lot of fighting. And there's another reason why it's not really a roguelike as far as I'm concerned. There's only really one weapon. There's a sword. You find it quite you start off without a weapon and then you pick up a sword and you sort of go into the game. There's only that one sword, but I did at one point have more than one sword in my inventory. I'd sort of managed to pick up two, but I couldn't tell why I had an inventory of swords if there's just the one sword and why I had two. And the only thing that was different between them was like the description. So I'm in like the weapons tab and there's one weapon and I can't select another weapon. I can only read the description, but they both seem to act the same. And having two didn't do anything. I've wondered a while I was playing if there's a sword that I've missed. And maybe now the game's out, I can look this up. And there seems to be a way to get out of and into the main world without your sword, which I think is would
Huh.
be interesting. I just cannot work it out.
That's really interesting.
But again, that's maybe I'll look into that at some point. But I've tried looking how to get out. I've tried looking for other weapons, but it seems to just be these swords.
Yeah.
Um, but the combat is it's fine. It's not like a standout feature, but like I said, there is a lot of time when you're not going to be doing combat and you are going to be avoiding it and you're going to be doing other things. And I think that the amount of work they put into some of the other features, like the gardening and stuff, which I'll get to later, is
But teasing me. I want to hear about the plants.
We'll get to the plants because it's such a huge thing that I need to build up to the plants. I'm sorry, I'll get there. I just need to get through the stuff so you have the context for the plants because it really is probably the standout feature. I'm still teasing you, I'm sorry. So yeah, the combat compared to other Metrovanias, we're talking like Hollow Knight, we're talking like Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. Now we're talking Metroid Dread. You know, there's shooting, there's sword action. It's fine. It doesn't stand out to me. It's not like a Soulsy game where like combat's a huge focus. But there is that's not to say there's not some interesting things going on here because there's some great boss fights. But also there's a sort of a mechanic that the enemies do where when you kill an enemy, it drops a body part on death, right? And you can eat that body part to give yourself
Jeez.
these stat boosts. Um, and there's like four stats. They're sort of they're
Question.
given. Go
Do
on.
stats carry between time loops?
No, they do not.
That's pretty roguelikey. I
Now,
don't know, Max.
but that's because the stats aren't stats, they're stat points, right? Because they don't actually say anything. There is some right, let me explain it. So there's 4 bars and they're 4 different colors, right? You have a red bar, a blue bar, an orange bar, and a green bar, right? 4 bars. Different foods, fruits, body parts give you different of these stat points, right?
Okay.
So you can eat by themselves, they do nothing, right? You can have four of all full bars of all 4 and be no better than you were before, right? But when you go into the menu and you're resting at one of the save points, you go into the skill tree. The different skills cost an amount of each bar.
I see.
So, for example, there'll
Okay.
be a skill that requires like I don't know halfway through of this bar, 3/4 full of this bar. So if you've eaten the right things, then you'll be able to buy that skill point, right? Now the skills they do reset per run. So when you finish a run, the skill tree goes back to naught, right? So that does reset, which is why I don't think which I guess is roguelike, I guess, 'cause but it's not like you're having to specifically choose a path through the skill set. It's quite small. You can finish it on a run. But and there also is there's items you can find later on in the game that, or, just throughout the game really, where you can lock certain stats,
Okay.
certain skills. So when you've got a skill that you like, for example, there's like a double jump, or there's, what else is there? There's a thing that lets you create compost when you're doing the plants. Sorry to keep, teasing you on that one. But there's like things that, they're not main upgrades. They're not like big things like the double jump and stuff like that. They're like, big upgrades, but they are little boosts, little things to make the combat better, make the combat easier. But the way to get the best foods and the best amount, most amount of stats, is that the enemies, while they drop their body parts, you can actually destroy the body parts as you're killing them. If you just sort of slash away at an enemy over and over again with the same sort of combo, you're just hitting X over and over again. The enemy will sort of like drop a bloody pulp, and it's just like pretty useless. There's like a little bit, um, couple of little boosts to a couple of bars there, right? It's not great. But if you go in and you do like a sword combo, and then you do a parry where you dodge, and then you return. I think it was called a what's it called? Like a dodge retaliation, something like that. You dodge, you press Y, you do another attack, and then you jump in the air and you do a spinning slash. That's 3 separate moves you've used. You've killed that enemy. It gets at the top. It says perfect variety, and it drops like a perfect version of its body part.
Okay.
And that will have great stat boost, right? So while it is not like standout combat, there is an element of mixing it up. And while you're in this skill tree, and you're buying skills that give you like an extra hit to your combo, it gives you like a downward kick while you're in the air. It does like an upward kick while you're sliding. These all go in towards having a perfect, a perfect variety bonus. So you do have to think about what you're doing in the combat. Otherwise, you're going to end up with just bloody pulps, and you can't survive on fruit alone. You have to have these meat bits as well.
Can't
Um,
survive on fruit alone.
Remember this: you can't. It's too much sugar. You can't survive on fruit alone. But the fruit is also very helpful. Some of the best stuff is locked behind the fruit,
Yeah,
but
and do you get that from planting?
eventually you do, yes.
God, eventually.
So there's another use for the food as well, the body parts and the
Okay.
fruit. You can feed them to other enemies in a
Yeah,
real
so
like
talk to me about that. I know when I made the short, there was some footage of that, and I know you were like, "I'm still trying to figure out what you do with this," and I know
yeah
you told me you figured it out. So like, what's
yeah.
what's the deal?
So I spent the whole game. I knew it was possible because I remember seeing it that you could feed creatures things in like one of the first trailers I ever saw, and then they explained that I could do it again in the game, and then either they didn't explain it very well, or I it didn't remind me, or I just overlooked it or something. But I did not know. It took me 16 hours into the game, and I'd already recorded the review, and I'd already written all of the stuff down that I was going to write down, and then it suddenly clocked that when you feed the creatures the fruit or the body parts, it stops them from wanting to attack you, and it also helps you with the planting. We're very close. We talk about planting, Pete. We're so close to talking about the plant.
Jeez.
So yeah, so it took me sort of 16 hours. You feed the enemies the right thing, and then there'll be sort of a new planting spot as you go. I do think it was my fault for missing it. I don't think it's necessarily the game's fault, but I do think that maybe there should have been a reminder, or that the information could have been more available to me, or I should have been able to go in and check. There just wasn't that option. It was all I just had to remember that from the one time it told me. Um, but but yeah, so that's how you get sort of your skills in the skill tree and how you sort of keep them between loops. But there is sort of more permanent upgrades, and it's the most important thing in the game is the extractor. It's a little floating robot that you get. It originally just sort of lets you double jump, and I was like, here we go, time for the upgrades. And there's a bunch of functions that you unlock like as you play through. So each time you get to a shaman and you destroy it, that has inside of it another function for your extractor. And most of the functions, Pete, they help with the gardening aspect of the game because gardening is the big unique feature of this game that I'm going to get to talk about now because this is
You know what,
I'm
Max?
so
Before you do
impressed.
that, I'm going to remind the people that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of February. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Lenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snacky Go, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the real, so the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. It's because of the support of listeners like you that we were able to get this game early and review it for your listening enjoyment. So thank you all so much for your incredible support of everything we do here at FlipScreen Games. Remember, if you want to go and show your support like they did, if you want to write in and get your thoughts and questions read on the air, just like someone did earlier during this review or in the question block segment on our show, or if you want to just join the community and keep the conversation rolling in between episodes, you can find links to all of that and much more over on our website, flipscreen.games. However you choose to get involved or show your support, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. All right, Max, we're back. Can I finally hear about these plants?
Of course you
I'm a
can.
plant guy now. I'm becoming a plant guy. I got to hear about these plants.
I can't see a single plant in your shot there, Pete.
Oh, excuse me. In my fish tank, I got
Oh,
live plants
okay.
in here now, man. I'm getting into
I don't know.
hydroponics.
I don't know if that counts. There are plants eat air, not water. That's just fish. They're just
They're
fish
fish.
and coral. They're just fish. So in Ultros, there are seeds that you can find throughout the game and you can plant. And it's this really interesting and unique feature that really does like give you pause and make you sort of like think. And I'll just go into it. There are 10 different seeds you can find that they're dotted around the map. Um, each area sort of like has its own native plant life, and sometimes it's planted for you, and sometimes you find the seeds. And they sort of do different things, and you can plant them. So when you're sort of going around the game, you'll see like this glittery soil on the floor, and there's like almost like sparks of light coming off of it, and that's how you know that you can plant there. So you'll start off with just like a basic seed, you plant it, and it sort of creates a tree, and then you can use that tree to sort of like hop up onto. And there's different ones that have different functions. There's like trees that can create platforms. There's like a grass almost that sort of creates vines on the ceiling that you can swing from. There's one that makes like a field of like hay, and it makes you run really fast. But if it going up a wall, you can run up the wall, and it's almost like a Metroid speed boost where you like burst through blocks when you do, or you
Okay.
can sort of like jump and leap in the air. There's ones that like all plants can like jam up machinery so you can pass. They've all got their own unique fruit that grows on them, and the fruit has different effects and they have different potencies. And the more dangerous the plant is, the better the fruit is. So there's going to be some plants that might attack you, or if you touch the fruit, it will hurt you, and you have to sort of break it and make it accessible for you. And then you get that reward of having the best fruit in the game. So the
So real
plants
quick,
kind of.
talk to me about like some of the mechanics of it. Like, because I'm because I know you said there's 10 different kinds of plants. They have all these
Hmm.
different functions, right? I got that. But you plant them,
Hmm.
and some of them take multiple cycles to mature, right?
Yes.
So, like, talk to me about that. If you find that glowing spot, is there only one kind of plant that you can use in any given situation? And
Not
if not,
necessarily.
how does that work then, right? So say I plant plant A right
Hmm.
here, and it matures in 2 runs, and then I find out, oh, actually, I want to plant B here for this other thing now.
Hmm.
Do they naturally die over cycles? Do you need can you dig them up and put something else there? Like, Just what how does like the management of that work?
Sure. So I've never noticed that they can take a couple of time loops to get to max size. You can plant any tree or any plant anywhere, right? There's no restriction to where it goes, but they do behave differently. So there, you have to take time to learn how the different trees behave and where you're going to plant it, how it's going to grow. Some of them they've all got like a base. You plant it and it does like grows a little bit, and then over the course of each run, it will grow and it will mature and things will happen. So the tree, for example, it starts off with just a tree. You can hop onto it from a height, but you can't like grip onto it and lift yourself up onto it like a ledge. Whereas when you come back next time, there'll be a ledge on it, and then that ledge will have some flowers on it, and I'll
Okay.
get into the flowers in a little bit as well. There's just little layers to it. Um, I've not noticed them
Plants and there's
dying.
fruit and there's flowers and you gotta that's the thing, man. It's important. You gotta learn about soils and pH and all
You've
kinds of
got
stuff,
to.
you
You've
know?
got to take the time. You've got to nurture it. You've got to like just like real plants. You've got to nurture. You've got to learn what you're doing. They can't. I've not seen a plant necessarily die, but there is like eventually a plant will lose like its color towards the edges, and I do think that like a plant can get too big and then maybe it's not got the supporting branches or things that it needs or and it can start to sort of wither at the top, but it doesn't necessarily die. You don't plant a plant and come back 6 months later and it's gone. If anything, it's bigger and it's grown out of proportion. um but you I've lost where I was, hang on.
So, like, yeah, I was asking, like, so what happens then? Like, if you've
Oh,
got
okay,
this
yeah,
plant
yeah,
that's overgrown and you realize you can put something else there to access this
yeah.
other you unlock a new skill, right? A new plant, and you wanna try it in this other spot. Can you get
Yes.
rid of that overgrown plant? Like, is there, like, a pruning mechanic or something? How's that work?
Yes, so that's sort of one of the or a couple of the functions of the extractor. You've got it's actually, it's a gardening tool essentially. You've got a drill that when you drill into the earth, you'll then sort of like taken into like a sliced, slice of the earth where you can see the seed that you've planted, the tree coming out of it, or the plant coming out of it, the roots that are coming out, and then the roots. They behave differently. Each plant sort of behaves differently. The roots might come straight down, or they might come back up, and there'll be flowers coming off of those roots. And while you're digging, you can also like find compost, which you can use to make trees grow quicker. With that digger, you can also, or the drill, you can also dig into the seed and just pull it straight back out, and then you've got that to plant somewhere else. So you can, like, if you do decide that I want something else here, or when you sort of maybe understand, you find a new type of plant, or you understand how the plant works a bit differently. You're like, I think I know what's going to go better here for my current goal. You can just pluck it out, put it in, and then leave it again. Um, and I think I wish I'd paid more attention to this before because I feel like I could have been making my gameplay more efficient if I'd sort of maybe paid more attention and worked out from the beginning, because I could have been planting the right thing, letting them mature. Whereas I did spend a lot at the end of the game going around farming this compost I mentioned that makes it grow quicker, just so that I could, right at the end of the game, I've finally got the plant I want in the place I want it. Um, I finally like played enough loops where I've got an enemy, I fed an enemy the right thing. That enemy has made a new planting spot for me where I need it between sort of two objectives.
That's so
Um,
cool the way that all
so
these
I can
systems
plant stuff.
interact.
Right? It's really, really cool. And yeah, like so then you plant the thing you need, and I use the two composts, and I know because I know that like maybe on a corner a certain type of flower will grow, or some of them it grows every sort of ever distance, or it grows when it goes around a bend, or it grows only in the center, these special flowers, which I'll get to in a second. Um, but also all of the one thing all the plants I said they do, they have the sort of unique fruit. Um, so I found that like planting stuff is not just useful for like, oh, I need to sort of get from A to B. It's also like, cool, I've not saved all the skills I want to save yet, but I do have these good seeds for this good plant that I know is going to give me some good boosts. So near the start of the game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant these good
Oh,
things, and then I come back next loop
interesting.
and I've got some fruit to have. Because you can just go straight ahead, pick up all this fruit, eat all this fruit, because the fruit does heal you, but you can also eat body parts for healing, like, or some fruit might heal you so well that you maybe don't need to eat too much of it. So you just, you eat the fruit, you get the boost, you get to go to the thing, and there's like less friction between you being weak and you being strong. And by the end of the game, when you've got a bunch of them saved, it's not as important. But it's there's an area right at the start of the game, or like sorry, it's right at the it's like halfway through the game, but it's sort of quite near the beginning, and you unlock it a little bit later. It's like it's a large garden. It's full of gardening spots. It's one of my favorite areas. It's a good place to sort of like get yourself started. It's got one of the sort of the first fast travel points you can access. You can get some early seeds, crack on with your run. It's really nice. It's really sort of cool to see. And then also it's just nice to sort of run around old areas and see that over like things I planted at the start of the game are now thriving, and they're covering huge areas of the map. And now, oh, I didn't realize I now had this. Um, these vines I can swing across to get somewhere, or when you're sort of trying to sort of move around the world and you're seeing the things that you need that you weren't aware you were planting or giving your helping yourself out later, and you were. That's also really important. So yeah, like I said, I was sort of ignoring it at the beginning, but there is still, the stuff I was doing is still helping me out. Because it would have been nice to sort of have some of the skill trees upgrades earlier. It would have been There's a really interesting mechanic that sort of to get the game's full ending. I'm not going to spoil the full ending. I'm not going to spoil any of the endings here or any of the sort of like the end game stuff. But there is a really interesting mechanic at the sort of the full ending. I was really addicted to it. It requires you to have a lot of plants down. It requires you to sort of understand how they grow, how their root systems work, how you want to connect them. It requires you to sort of get the bugs to sort of give you more planting spaces, and it was just really cool. And it made backtracking through and sort of finishing off really rewarding. It was really awesome. That's another system that took me forever to work out is like how unique all these plants are because until yesterday, like I said, we recorded this thing and I was trying to get my head around it, and I suddenly realized, oh, hang on, I'm looking at this all wrong. I'm now looking at these roots, and each plant is unique. It's its own thing. It's got its own quirks. It grows differently. You can move it in different ways. There's a plant that is like it starts growing up straight and then it splits off into two, and then it sort of stops. What you can do is connect two of them together, and then they then feed off each other to grow even more, and they create fruit
Whoa,
where they
okay,
interconnect.
cool.
And there's a liquid in the game. I can't remember the name of the liquid, but there's like a character who's like processing. I think it's called Jego. He's processing the liquid. He's trying to um, discover what it does and what it means. And plants that touch that just go mad. And I didn't realize that's what it was. I planted a quite a dangerous plant just to because I needed to I wanted to plant something there. I planted it in a place where there was like a waterfall of this liquid, and then I came back and found that this waterfall was just like cascaded. This plant had cascaded down, and it actually like really messed me up because I was like, I need to get back up here, and I can't get back up here because I've got this dangerous plant that kills me every time I touch it. I managed to get up and replant something else, and I planted this the one I was talking about where like they want to sort of split up and meet up again. And because it goes so crazy, it was basically on the map. It shows you all your plants if you have bought that skill tree upgrade, and I can just see all the way down. I can see like this big plant is sort of structured, this network that it's created that starts right at the top of this one area, goes all the way down the map into this other area. And when I went there and I was sort of traveling up this waterfall, using this waterfall to sort of as a shortcut between areas, I was picking up like 20, 30 of this fruit. And I was like, I'm set for healing for ages. I can go and plant this and get more compost now because I've got that skill. And it was just really interesting to see it all sort of work. And then you sort of use that in a way that because there's this liquid flowing through this whole area, I was like, I had one of the other extractor abilities is like you can spray a spray that like coaxes plants to sort of lean a certain way, which is useful for there's a variety of different things you can do. But with this,
Sure.
you can sort of like coax the ends that are like looking for things. It's like a fleshy end that's like looking for something. If you coax it into that, then all of a sudden it
So
just starts
gross.
growing. Yeah, it's really gross. Yeah, but you sort of like you create this network and this sort of living um, like ecosystem of plants that you created that grows over time, and you can force it to grow, but it does sort of like grow and connect, and you know you can combine the various elements of the different plants to do different things. You can make your own platforms. You can make ways that you can run up walls or speed yourself around, or like this other. I'm not going to sort of talk too much about it, but like this other end game mechanic where you want to be able to have plants that are close to each other because you want to be able to unlock certain things. And I spent ages. I was really scratching my head of like, how am I going to do this? And as soon as I worked out, plants have different functions, um, and you can make more planting spots, and you know you can make these flowers appear in certain ways, but you have to understand how it works and how the plants work and how you can combine the plants and nurture them in the right way. All of a sudden it was like playing a whole new game, and it was amazing. I was creating this huge amazing garden. I was linking it all together. There was like lights, and there was it was beautiful. It was really really lovely, and I wish that I'd been able to work that out. It was really rewarding where when I sort of like could see my whole garden and I could sort of see my progress and how and where I'd been basically and what I'd been doing this whole time. It was really addictive as I went for the sort of the true ending. And I highly recommend. I said this in a tweet earlier that I highly recommend if you're going for the true ending or you're going to pick up Ultros and play the game and you sort of get to the end and you think oh there's more to it. Keep digging. Find work it out for yourself because there's nothing. I just while I was frustrated and originally there was a lot in here about how frustrated I was by these not being well explained. As soon as it clicked for me, I was like, "Oh," and it just gave me a deeper appreciation for the sort of the game as a whole.
And I think, it's worth pointing out, right? Like you said, our listeners will be able to benefit from like you having had that experience. We're gonna put a
Yeah.
video out tomorrow that's gonna have like 5 things I wish I knew when I started playing, right? Which, will be a great tool for y'all if you do decide to jump into the game. Speaking of which, the developers and publisher were kind enough to provide us with an extra code that we're going to be giving out to a member of the community as well. So if you're interested in playing the game, make sure you go and head over to our Discord tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about our giveaway, where you can secure a copy of the game for yourself and check it out over on. It'll be Steam copy, right?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great.
Which luckily we have a big Steam community, so
Yeah, so
perfect.
maybe we'll even give it away on the Steam Deck podcast. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we'll
that's not
we'll have
bad.
an announcement in the next couple days, but keep your eyes
Absolutely,
peeled. Um,
absolutely.
yes,
So let
that's
me
cool,
just
man.
jump
Like
back to the oh, go on.
I was just gonna say, I think it's really great that like you have this kind of like, oh, like I wish the game was communicating with me
Mhm.
more, but then it encouraged you to explore and experiment, and then you get to this point where you're like, oh, right, like you had that aha moment where it allowed you to, kind of discover how to make that perfect plan and get your network put together and everything. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Like that sounds very rewarding,
It
especially
it yeah.
taking advantage of those time loop mechanics in an interesting way.
Yes, yeah, there was, like, towards the you can because each time you, uh, break a shaman sort of incubator and you head back to Ultros for it to birth and the time it restarts, you have to sort of do one and the other. So, basically, you can finish the game and get the first ending like I did, in those 7 loops because you do it, each time. I beat the game in 18 loops because there was times where I was like, "Okay, cool, I've planted a bunch of stuff, I've done a bunch of stuff. I now need to reset this so I can, get that reward of doing that." And then before that, I would go around and just sort of like make sure I planted things and put things in the ground so that for future me, my next run, I wasn't just like throwing a load of resources away. I was making sure I had them. And what you say is great. It was great. Like I said, it was great when I had that moment. But I do think there was a large period of frustration there for me. I think sometimes one of my only real issue with the game, my sort of frustration with the game was that it was too vague at times, and I was like, there's a point
You
where I'll be
wanted
running
more
around.
communication and more
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah, like I knew, there are entire mechanics. I've just spoken, a while about my favorite feature of the game, which is the planting, and it's a feature I only really got to grips with 5 hours before the end of the game, and I'd spent 16 hours playing the rest of the game, and I understood it, and I was using it, not to its fullest, but I was trying it, and it wasn't till it clicked that I was like, "Oh, yeah," retrospectively, I was like, "This is great. This is cool. This makes sense. It explains a load of behaviors that I've been seeing and all that stuff." And I think my problem is that and whether this is the time loop at play as well, things are explained to you once and then they don't come up again. And while there and a lot of the characters, because they're aware of the time loop, or there are characters who they'll say a piece of dialogue once, and then because it's the time loop, they'll be aware they've already said that and they won't say it again. Or there'll be characters who will say the same thing over and over again that's still as vague as the first time they said it, and there's never any elaboration. Um,
Mm.
there are hints at things you can do, but it never really explains like why you want to do
It
that thing
sounds
that
like you
it's
would benefit
saying.
from like a log system of some kind where you could be like, "Hey, like these remember you learned these skills," or like,
Yes.
"Hey, like, this NPC told you this." Like,
Yeah. There
what do
is
you think that
bits
might
of that.
mean?
There is bits of that. There's a specific section in the menu that is like tutorials or like reminders, and it's like, here's how you use this mechanic, this mechanic, this mechanic. But it only really explains like the how to do your combat, how to use the upgrades, how to use the like a couple of the extractor tools. But it then doesn't say, it doesn't remind you that you can drill into the earth to make enemies, or to make enemies sort of restart to repopulate. You can then feed those enemies to sort of do X, Y, Z. It doesn't really. There's some stuff that I'm glad that was um that was vague. Like the whole thing I was talking about that I didn't want to get into too much. You're sort of connecting the whole ship up. You sort of like uncover something, and then you're through your planting and through your sort of gameplay, you are sort of bringing the ship back together. You're opening up fast travel. You're backtracking through, and it's making it feel more rewarding. And sort of I loved working that out for myself. I loved understanding how that fits into the narrative and what that means for the story and the characters and what that how that sort of leads to you having the better ending. But I did also find out it was too difficult to work out how to sort of do that in certain areas. And then the time loop stuff, like I said, it did make it quite frustrating to sort of repeat the old areas and have to do like there's a mini game that I was like, oh, I've got to do this again. Um, oh, I've got to sit through this character dialogue and this combat thing again, or I've got to do this boss fight again. And there is ways to skip around it. Like I said, there are ways to sort of make it easy for yourself, or ways that you can sort of go the right way. But there's also like where you can accidentally wind up there and be like, oh, well, now I've got to start again or find another way. And
Sounds
like,
like kind of a bit of a frustrating balance between, like, things you wish it would tell you more than once and the stuff that you're like,
yeah,
I've done this before. That would be I would be
yeah,
get past
yeah.
that."
Yeah, but I think the frustration is that, like, it's hard to find that balance of, like, there's the things that it doesn't tell you that you're working out for yourself, you're like, "That feels amazing," and then there's some stuff where it's like, you might miss this whole mechanic or give up with this whole mechanic, like I almost did, because because you're, you aren't aware of what's happening, um, and, like, I found there's one example where I found a part of the game, I'd sort of been to one area of the game, chosen another path, and I sort of, like I was just roaming around, I was doing all I can, experimenting around, and I sort of destroyed a barrier between sort of 2 areas of the game, and I found a way into another area of the game through a different way that I'd ever been, and it changed that whole area up, and I was like, "This is great, like, this feels really good, I've connected these 2 parts of the map, I've made progress, I've made a shortcut for myself, I've found a way to do, you know, plant-related things, or, I found a way that I can make it easier for myself to do certain things." Then I got to the end of my time loop where I sort of like finished what I needed to do, restarted the loop, and went back there, and it sort of reset that progress. So I didn't have that shortcut anymore, which is a bit frustrating. It didn't take me long to get back because there was some fast travel involved, but I did also feel like there are some times that I wish some things that I wish didn't loop, and the
Yeah,
plants don't loop, some of the characters don't loop, but then certain things do loop, and like
that feel like
I
they
get it.
are a little arbitrary, like, it's like, "Why am I
Yeah.
doing this again if this doesn't?"
Yeah, there's one thing to sort of like narratively have me starting again, and there's another thing to take progress away. Um, but
I feel that.
that's the only negative thing I can really say about the game, because overall, I'm going to sort of get into my summary now. I think we've been going on for a while here.
Yeah, yeah, final thoughts. Let's do some final thoughts.
I really liked Ultros. I really, really did. I think it looks amazing. It's like equal parts confusing and fascinating. It's rewarding. It's like disgusting and it's beautiful and it's like relaxing and it was addictive and it's a grower. I've said this a few times that like the plants, it grows on you, and you really have to, if you give it the time and you really like delve into and take the time to learn things, um, you get more out of it, and there's just so much going. I think it could have done with like a glossary, like you said, or like a way to look at past dialogue, bit more explanation and stuff. Um, and there are, like I said, there are some things best left unexplained. But I do think the game was able to naturally tell certain concepts to me. There are some key things that I must have overlooked, and that's on me and my experience with the game. But I say that as someone who can look past that. And while I wish I did know that some of that stuff before my final few hours, but now I do know them. Like I said, I have a huge appreciation for the game as a whole. The scale of what Haddock, I think you pronounced it wrong earlier. I was going to correct you, but I didn't. What Haddock has achieved here, because I got
Damn.
clarification. Sorry, I should have corrected you. The scale of what they were able to achieve just with the plant system alone is massive. Like, when I think about, there's still things I could do. I've not done everything. There's still upgrades to find. There's still areas of the map that I haven't quite reached yet, and I could do if I wanted to go back and do it. Even though I've reached the true ending, there's doesn't mean I've done everything. But I do think that, like, damn, they went hard on this plant system. There's even to have 10 plants, and maybe only, let's say, maybe only 6 of them are useful, and there's a couple that aren't as useful. The fact that they all have like unique root systems, unique rules to them, and they do different things, and they have their own fruits and stuff, like, I think it's really impressive. Giving this a numbered score, I'd give this a solid 8 out of 10. Um,
Very good.
but yeah, I think this game's really good, and the tastemaker approves. Number one tastemaker, thumbs up from me. Um,
Whoosh. I
yeah,
gotta get like a little fucking like, I need a button I can press in the graph.
yeah.
Just you giving a thumbs up. Whoosh.
I
Approve.
I think that I'm really interested in what Haddock's up to. I think that yeah, been some great partnerships with the art, with the
You really
music.
left me out to dry on that one, huh? You let me say their name wrong, and then you're like
I'm
45 minutes later, by
I'm
the way.
sorry. I was gonna say it, but I was
I'm
like, you
sorry,
you were
Haddock.
you were in a
I'm
flow.
sorry. I'm sorry.
You were in a flow, not haddock, haddock.
A doc. Okay, great. Now I'm 0 for 3 on that one.
Watch
Good.
me be wrong. Watch them actually say, "No, it's haddock or haddock," or, I'm pretty sure it's haddock or
Either
haddock.
way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ultros is the name of the game, and you should go check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Check this. It's out on PlayStation 5 and on PC. It comes out at the time of recording this, and the time this goes out, tomorrow on the 13th of February. Thanks again to Haddock and the publisher. Ooh, I forgot the name
Hold on,
of
I got that
yeah,
one. It is
thanks.
Kepler Interactive.
Yeah, thanks to them for the code. And yeah, check this one out. I think you guys are really gonna love it, especially if you liked games like, maybe not if you're like a big combat heavy sort of Metroidvania guy, but if you're sort of like you want to play something weird, you want to play something quirky, you want to play something that's going to visually entice you, something a bit more unique, something that's not like another Hollow Knight, or you want to sort of try something new, and you're willing to put the time in, you're willing to get to grips with the features. And even if you do want to sort of like save yourself some time, look up a guide, watch our video on the 5 things I wish I knew. I'm going to try not to spoil some of these things for you so that you can learn them for yourself. I just want to sort of maybe solve some of the friction for you. So yeah, I'd highly recommend giving this a go. Oh, and for our Steam Deck listeners, this does play really well on Steam Deck. I played the whole thing on Steam Deck. I had a lot 90 FPS on the OLED. Performance was great. They said before launch that they were doing they were going to be verified, and they are verified. The game runs really well. Good battery life. There's even features in there to extend your battery life, and we've got a video about that coming out as well.
There you go.
So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again for the code. Thank you all for tuning in for our first embargo review here. And I hope you'll go and check out the game. And remember that we'll have a giveaway for a special member of the community that we'll be talking about on launch day, which is tomorrow. So tune in. Make sure you check out Ultros. You can go wish list it and check it out now, and it'll be available for you tomorrow if you're listening to this on launch day. Or if you're listening to this after launch day, guess what? It's already available right now. So go check it out.
Hmm.
Max, any final thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Um, Play weird games, man. Just play more weird games. Let weird games
Play
wash
weird
over you.
games.
Play weird games.
Let them wash over you. I like
Let them
that.
like
Let weird
a
games
fine
wash over
mist.
you.
Just take them for
Love
what they
that.
are. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us here on another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to show your support for the show, if you want to get involved in the community, if you want to write into the show, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web. However you choose to get involved or show your support for the show, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of FlipScreen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.